Your campaign doesn't need to last for several years. In fact, if this is your first time running, I'll take it a step further. You should not make a multi-year campaign be your end goal. I think it might even be an actively harmful decision. Of course, it might naturally become a multi-year campaign, but you should focus on letting your players experience a satisfying ending to an adventure so that they'll be excited to start a second one. And if you've played loads of games of D&D, I'm going to suggest you take a 6-week break from your ongoing campaign the next time you feel like you've hit the end of a chapter. During this break, you'll be running a standalone adventure. Welcome to Mystic Arts, where the bard can seduce the dragon, but I will ask them, are you sure? My name is Daði, I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for 10 years. The 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide defines an adventure as a blending of scenes of exploration, social interaction, and combat into a unified whole that meets the needs of your players and your campaign. And it defines campaigns as adventures are the building blocks of a D&D campaign. For a campaign is what you get when you string 2 or more adventures together. But what happens if we decide to not string multiple adventures together for a campaign? What if we just play through one small self-contained standalone adventure? And when it's done, we retire those characters. This may seem obvious, but maybe not. If you're at all familiar with the big hardcover adventures, you might not realize that D&D stories can come in any length. Don't get me wrong, I love running big epic campaigns that go on for years. They're my preferred style of play, mostly because of how much agency players have over the story. But I also love running standalone adventures. Not short campaigns or one-shots, I'm talking about something else. Those big long campaigns aren't easy. They're a lot of work. You want a big world, either bought or homebrewed. You need loads of adventures. And if you're like me, you want them to be at least tangentially connected. And scheduling can be a serious challenge. Getting a group of adults together and committed to playing together for years? Yikes. But you don't have to run a long campaign. I think you should try running a standalone adventure. Just one adventure that tells a complete story from start to finish and leaves everybody feeling satisfied. In the end, your players will want to play again, maybe with the same characters, but maybe not. A long-running campaign is like a TV series. It can be serialized or episodic. A one-shot or a dungeon crawl is like a Monster of the Week episode, but a standalone adventure, it's like a movie. It's split over a handful of game nights, sure, but when we're done, it might have a structure not dissimilar from a film. In my experience, these can be anywhere from 4 to 10 sessions. Any shorter, and you're either running a series of one-shots, or worse, a long and bloated one-shot, like those Disney Plus TV shows that somehow are neither shows nor films, they're just like really long movies. And if you're running more than 10 sessions, then you're probably running a fairly hamstrung on-rails adventure. It's such a commitment at that point that expectations about character backstory, downtime, or a much greater degree of choice starts to come into play. To me, the magic number is 6 sessions. You use the first session to set everything up, then in sessions 2, 3, and 4, the players run around investigating the setting at their own pace with maximal agency. In session 5, you do your best to reel in the sandbox and direct the players towards the end. And the 6th session is your climax and your resolution. Still, it's not the end of the world if the penultimate session comes a bit later, the 6th or 7th session, however long it takes your players to piece everything together. If you're a fairly new DM, I think this is ideal. Once you've run a couple of 5-room dungeons and made one up on your own, you can look at crafting a standalone adventure. It should be next on your list. Don't go crazy or anything. Pick a theme, extrapolate on it, and then string it together. I think Dragons of Stormwreck Isle from the 2022 starter set is a decent example of what you should look for. Basically, you make an adventure area, a forest, an island, a mountain range, a town, it can be whatever. Then, populate it with 3 or 4 adventure locations. That could be a 5-room dungeon or a self-contained encounter, that's up to you. Every location then hints at the villain, and once you've gone to 2 or 3 adventure locations, the players should have enough clues to work out who and where the villain is. Then, they go to the villain's lair, and you bring the adventure to an end with a boss battle. It's that simple. You can obviously make it more complicated, add some branching choices, have there be more dungeons than the players have time to explore, or put in some other ticking clock that raises the stakes. That's up to you. If you're a more experienced DM and you're already running games, I think this is even better for you. You can use standalone adventures to build up your world. If there's a historic moment in your world's past, play through it. They did this on Critical Role with Exandria Unlimited Calamity, and it was awesome. Since it's a historical event, the players know roughly how the story goes, but not the story of their own characters, so make sure to lean into that. If there's an event in your world that's about to happen, but you don't know which way it's going to go, make a standalone adventure out of it to sort it out. That way the players decide the fate of your world. I love running these when I don't know what's going to happen next. For me, as the DM, I have some questions that I need answering, so I make it a game, often one with a moral question at its heart. There was a nation in my campaign setting that had a chance to secure its independence from an overreaching empire, but bad actors on every side made matters more complicated. So I set up a short 5-session adventure just to figure out what happened to this little nation. Don't worry, they got their independence. In another example, I ran a Cowboys and Indians style campaign to determine what happened to the Indians as their neighbors were writing their new constitution. They got their freedoms too. My players love to fight for the underdogs, even if the other option is just right there. I run all kinds of adventures like this to fill up my world. Like I mentioned in the channel trailer, I have run 62 adventures set in my own homebrew campaign setting. This is how I know so much about it. We've played all across my world. They weren't all standalone adventures, mind you, but many were. If there's a character or setting in your world you want to introduce, you can do it through a standalone adventure. Maybe there's a plane of existence you wish you knew more about, or a city, or an organization, or a faction. Make a standalone adventure centered on whatever it is. My favorite kind of standalone adventure is the Metropolitan murder mystery. I do these in my D&D setting about once a year. It helps me flesh out the city the adventure takes place in and gives us all an opportunity to get to know them inside and out. These have a similar format every time and my players love them. Even though the structures are similar, the players never know the details of the story, so the big picture eludes them until the very end. I don't know what the players want to do, so they influence the story along the way. I cannot overstate how powerful story structure can be. In this Metropolitan murder mystery adventure, the first session is all about investigating a crime scene. As the session goes on, the players get a bunch of clues. Then, in the next few sessions, they run around town trying to piece the clues together, meeting NPCs, both as suspects and as obstacles, finding red herrings, breaking into places, and usually causing a big ruckus. And then, in the penultimate session, they find out who did it. How do you know which session is the penultimate session? It's the one where they find out who did it. I try to aim at that being session number 5, but sometimes it's number 6 or 7, and one time it was session number 9. No harm there, variety is the spice of life. The reason I say the penultimate session is the one where they solve the mystery is because of real life pacing. It allows us to make sure that we start the final session with a boss battle and end it with a resolution. And the resolution is especially fun in standalone adventures. You and your players get to do a sort of little where are they now segment, like biopics do. Silas the Barbarian went on to be nominated by Victoria Mallory to become Redyard's chief of police. It allows you and your players to work together to give these characters a legacy and firmly plant them in your world. Usually in these stories, the murderer isn't a lone actor, but it's a part of some grand conspiracy, often perpetrated by the system they're a part of. And then, in the climax, the players get to fight against the system to take down the evil that let all this happen. One time, they found out the murderer pretty quickly and discovered there was no evil plot behind the murder, but there was an evil plot behind the cover-up. In another adventure, the murder was so politically important that nobody dared accuse them. If it were simple, this would have been a one-shot. The grander conspiracy allows us to nest these mysteries inside the other. First, they solve who sent the victim the death threats. Then, they solve who visited the victim the day of the murder. Then, they break into the morgue to get a look at the body. These are all interesting little locations to play around with. You can take spins on this kind of genre endlessly. Why do you think there are a million murder mystery TV shows? Go watch Columbo. It's great.
One more thing.
And here's why my players also love this. Do you have the kind of players that get bored with their characters quickly? Maybe even players who want to retire their characters constantly just to bust out new builds they're excited by? If so, this is a way to service them. Let them play a different character for a few sessions in a standalone adventure. And if you're like me, and you know way more people who want to play D&D together than you could ever dream to run for, you can of course invite a few of them to these standalone adventures. You can then mix and match groups too. If you're playing in 2 different groups, maybe you invite a few players from each into this new standalone adventure. You'll start to build up your own community of players who know your world and are invested in it. They've got little characters running around in your settings. And that's what's especially fun here. The roster of characters you start to build up. The devil-worshipping paladin becomes a local lord. The anarchist rogue becomes a journalist. The captain of the mercenary company resigns and her lieutenant takes charge. When you go back to your main campaign, these characters can show up as NPCs and your players will love it. It'll be excited to see their characters from Standalone Adventures. Bonus points if there's been a time skip and they're older and wiser, or just as chaotic as before. It's like building up your own franchise. Like those Disney Plus shows, you've got your own cameos, your own version of Cad Bane, Happy Hogan, or everyone's favorite, Jimmy Woo. I think you can have so much fun with these kinds of adventures, especially if you use the investment questionnaire that I talked about in my video on why I don't do Session Zero. It lets us all get on the same page quickly and start playing. Obviously, this isn't the only way to run the game. I usually play long campaigns that go on for years, but I invite you to try this method out and see if you like it. And if you really love the characters in the Standalone Adventure, you can always have them return for a sequel. For example, I have this mercenary company adventure that we all fell in love with. Basically, I stole the chain from MCDM and ran it in my own world with a different set of characters on a slightly different set of adventures. My players loved it. Some of them had watched the MCDM live streams and knew the premise. Others read The Black Company, and others were just happy to play more D&D. I even associated the team with Fleetwood Mac's The Chain because they would have a 70s rock song theme, right? So since we fell in love, I kept coming back to them. Occasionally, I'd run a short adventure and then we'd be back to our main game. Or more accurately, I'd run the short adventure while running the main game. What can I say? I run lots of D&D. One last suggestion. If one of your players is going on vacation or a trip abroad, maybe they're unavailable for a few weeks, run a standalone adventure in the interim. The absent player won't miss the main game and everyone else can keep playing. It's the best of both worlds. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. Thanks so much for watching. Me and my girlfriend make these videos together as a team and we're so happy to see the growth of the channel since we started. Loads of folks in the comments are asking where we came from, and that's reasonable and all, but from our perspective, we've been thinking about making videos like these for ages. It's you folks who came out of nowhere to watch, and thanks for that. Thanks for liking these videos and the stunningly positive comments. Anyways, if you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing and hitting the bell to be notified when we release new videos. Until next time, keep studying the mystic arts.